want to start off by saying thank you for attending. I know that there's a lot of conversation in the neighborhood, in the community, and I appreciate you taking the time today to come and listen, get an update, and be able to share your thoughts and your concerns. I think how this is going to go, I have a presentation. If you have a question related to the slide, let me know. And once the presentation is done, then we can open it up for conversation. Is that fair? All right. I'm a gym teacher. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. All right, Jefferson property update. There's three parts of the presentation. We're going to give an update on the project, understand local opportunities, and project assurances. On project progress. I know this is a little bit difficult to see. Right now, if you look, high school building demolition, right here, roof replacement at Madison, and consolidation efforts here. Right now, in the summer of 2022, right now, for our board meeting in May, a special meeting at May 25th, I'm going to present to the Board of Education, myself and the Facility Committee, a recommendation to move forward on the bidding process for Kennedy project. A second bid, we had 7 bids, one that we'd like to award related to taking down the 1927 building. I have a recommendation at the May 25th meeting on that contractor to be awarded that bid. And that work will be, depending on the schedule for demolition, maybe late summer, maybe August 1st is my goal. We'll start. If you come out here a little bit, Jefferson Elementary building demolished, future plans finalized. Underneath that is the early spring of 2025. So we will be out of this building at about that time. So we've got a couple of years here yet that we're working with. Any question on the timeline? On the next slide, we'll get some highlights of this timeline. Timeline highlights. Late spring, early summer, final architect and engineering plans completed. Like I said, I think we've got the engineering and plan for Kennedy Elementary or Bessie Elementary near completed. Building transition plan has been identified to accommodate students during construction. We will be moving the students out of Kennedy and utilizing Madison Elementary. Summer of 2022 project bidding begins. As I described, late summer, building expected to be demolished. That's the 1927 building. Fall of 2022, construction began on Consolidated Elementary. So we're hoping early fall that we'll start construction once the Kennedy Elementary comes down, or the 1927 building comes down. We'll be able to start again on the construction of that new elementary. Spring of 2025, Jefferson demolished and not expected until the elementary building project is completed. Timeline highlights. Any questions on those dates? Jefferson property recap. A little bit of history. On January 7, 2019, a Jefferson neighborhood presentation was hosted, and feedback is collected regarding ideas for the future of Jefferson property. I believe that meeting was in this room. Neighborhood feedback points that we captured. Adequate parking lots so streets and parking doesn't become an issue. Be mindful of night lighting and noise. Prioritize maintenance and appearance of the vacated property. Community garden was suggested. Controlled development of new housing was discussed. Playground, pavilion, and bathrooms were part of those highlights of that meeting. January 7th, 2019. November 19, 2020, the first Jefferson Neighborhood Committee meeting was held. So we solicited interest from neighborhood for those that would like to be part of the committee. And we had our first meeting on November 19th. Highlights of that: district retaining property as green space for practice fields, playground, walking paths, or trails, division of property for single-family homes to address, a local housing issue, explore mixed use of space. I think the conversation between housing, but also thinking about the opportunity for green space or footpath traffic for the space be included with the development was discussed, that it was a blended site. Jefferson property recap. In additional meetings with the committee, we explored the possibility of green space plan developed by committee members, Dr. Jefferson and Mr. Lirum, and how to reduce the financial burden of the district because of the property and upkeep. Highest and best use of the property for the district, neighborhood, and city would be a division of the property was discussed with the purpose of single-family home sites, potential sands park opportunities for practice fields. That's kind of an update on our recap discussions. Proposed park space for voluntary design by Dr. Jefferson and Mr. Lirum, with features including space for outdoor learning, physical exercise and recreation, outdoor laboratory for the study of native plants, existing football, soccer field, and playground left as is. Existing parking lot is reduced in size. A green path mowed at the width of 8 feet prepared for walking and running. Hard surface path connecting the parking lot and the playground, and new tennis courts with 4 to 6 feet wide walkway from elm to cedar. I think we have a diagram of that plan too. And this may not be the final plan we received, but I think it represents the concept. This presentation will be posted online too if you need to take those. Jefferson property through exploration with the Jefferson Neighborhood Committee, we learned define the boundary and infrastructure of the property through Spicer group survey. So we had property survey. Use of bond funds allocated for the removal of Jefferson building. This was a This was a discovery or something that we communicated that kind of put a hindrance on what we can do with the property because bond funds would be used to take it down. So we have a 25-year bond to pay off. So we wouldn't be able to sell that property potentially because we have 25 years. There's still a lien on the property from the bond. Does that make sense? So that our limitations were something that we had to take into deep consideration. That's what we knew at that time. So until the portion of the bond has been paid off. Potential for alternative funding for the removal of the building may need to be considered. So as we heard suggestions for housing and single-family housing on the property, and back up one bullet point, that was our challenge because there was a restriction because bond funds were used for taking down the building. So the footprint of this building would not be eligible for that use. Yes? Yeah, please.
Would you define alternative?
Well, I think it would have to be funding that didn't come from from the bond.
Well, more specifically, you're talking about millage requests for increase or?
No. Anything collected on a millage increase, then that would continue to have limitations on what we could do. Because Treasury would say, you owe money on property, you can't tear it down and sell it because you took a loan out on it. Okay.
So for example, your funds from local revenue sharing board, your percentage from that would be allowed, funds for that could be used for that purpose then? Did that restrict the project?
Say it one more time, make sure I have it.
I believe the school system gets money from local revenue sharing?
Yeah.
You could use that money potentially to take the village out and not be restricted after that, is that correct? It would not restricted funds?
I would have to check in for what that designated use of that money would be. Is it for K-12 education or is it just slush?
Okay.
Okay, but no, those revenues that we take in are built into our operational budget too. So something would have to give to use those funds. Okay. Did everyone hear that question related to, yes, Liz?
I was under the understanding, and something wrong. I thought the bond didn't have to be paid off to do that, and had to have a certain equity in it before you can sell it.
Yeah, it would take 5 years before we could do a determination of equity.
Okay,
So, but there would be limitations, and our attorney's like, this is a real slippery slope. But it would be 5 years, and then we could do an equity evaluation, yes.
5 years from when the bond was passed, correct?
I think the expenditure of them, but that is a good question. Any other questions on that? Thank you. Bond narrative, in educational materials presented to the community regarding the Jefferson property, bond fund allocations indicated the following. Repurpose Jefferson Elementary site, guidance from the Jefferson Neighborhood Advisory Committee. Demolish 1954 Jefferson building, green space residential home site, and Max athletic field considerations are all in the discussion with the committee. That's been from the get-go. Yes?
Is residential home sites specifically mentioned in the bond proposal?
I don't think so.
So
Either is
that's-
green space.
So why is it added here?
I think we try to include all of the things that we've been discussed. Green space is included also, and that wasn't necessarily in the bond. Post-bond discussions, we've been project design meetings with our AD team, determine concessions would need to be made due to current market conditions. So the bond passed, and as you know, what's that? A year ago, yeah, and so there was a year gap related to us starting to get pricing and design correct. We're facing, as you know, inflation, and some materials are up over 20%, but by average, the industry is seeing about an 18% or more increase on labor and materials for this project. So we found ourselves up against a challenge related to the money that we received, and that was applied to the planning, and then the cost of what we decided for the bond increased 20%. So we have to review that, meet the requirements or the language in the bond, and do it in a way that doesn't exceed the cost where we can't afford it. So we're looking at exceeding the collection of the bond to accomplish our needs. And that's why our planning process has been taking a little bit longer, because we've had to make some amendments or considerations. Yes, ma'am?
Back a slide or two, if you were to obtain alternative funding for the demolition of this building, I don't know what percentage of that has been earmarked for the whole bond, but could that then be applied to additional monies that are being calculated now, as opposed to when it was originally determined?
Yes. Yes. Next one, identified project alterations for the equitable and money-saving plan, maintaining the integrity of the project. I described that we're still working with the promises and scope of the bond, but we have to do that thinking about dollars and cents and bottom line. It's been a challenge. The city is responsible for approximately 180 acres of park and community space. Development of additional park space is not necessarily a priority. Our city manager here. Bill, is there anything that you'd like to address related to that comment?
Yeah, I would just say in general, that is not a priority. We are trying to upgrade our existing parks, but adding to this in general.
Thank you.
How much is it gonna cost to raise this building?
It's hard to say because the fluctuation in the market. Right now, we have just about $400,000
$400,000?
budgeted for it, but we haven't put it out for bid yet.
And what is that as a percentage of the total bond?
Well, it's just under about $30 million bond, and Ken's a math person. I'm sorry.
1.33%.
Yeah,
Less than 2 pennies of a dollar. Okay.
yes, sir.
Who are the A&E team?
That's our architecture and engineering, so our architecture and construction team. We were collaborating with them for the scope of our project. So the architects and engineers.
Was there any consideration for leaving the building, it's a nice building, and using it for other community purposes?
Well, that goes against what the bond language was.
How much would it take to pay it off so that the facility could stay here?
I can capture that question, I'm not sure.
Is it approximately $400,000?
Again, I can't answer that question, but I can get back to you on that question.
Where would the land bank get their money?
Let's get to the point of the presentation, maybe we can address that. Okay? Contact by Rachel Nelson of the Madison County Land Bank Authority to discuss potential role of the county land bank in property acquisition and infrastructure, preparation for the property development. And not sure, Rachel's here, and she's from the County Land Bank, and I think she'll be able to answer some questions as we move forward. Met with the Jefferson Neighborhood Committee to bring them in on the county land bank conversation and a potential collaboration for creating a future of this property. Again, this is just exploring possibilities. What's next for Jefferson property? If the district were to partner with the county land bank, collaboration with local and state agencies may provide potential expansion of funding options. Brownfield opportunity may exist for county land bank to fund the demolition of the Jefferson building, allowing the allocated bond funds of more than $400,000 to be redirected to educational focus project priorities. Maybe Rachel, this opportunity that can speak what Brownfield is and how that might and other revenue sources that you haven't locked in yet, but what are possibilities? Yeah. Ms. Raddatz, is there a trick?
There is.
Takes around the karaoke.
Hi. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Rachel Nelson. I'm the county treasurer, which also makes me the chair of the Manistee County Land Bank. So just to touch on Brownfield, what that can do for us, and this is unique to the land bank, any property that the land bank owns is eligible for a Brownfield plan. And so one of the things that we could do is if a developer says, hey, we need to spend a lot of money to build these homes. It's going to cost us this. We're up here. But to make that affordable for people like nurses and teachers and workforce housing, people that want to be in our community but are having trouble finding a home, we can only sell it down here. And so what they call that is gap funding. And so that then we can come to the developer, create the Brownfield plan, and say, okay, we want these people to be in this community, we want new homes that are move-in ready, quality homes, but we can only pay down here. You're going to spend here, we're going to use that Brownfield plan to cover the gap for you. Other funding, we are eligible as a land bank for other grant opportunities. There are a lot of things throughout the state. Maybe just to kind of briefly explain what the land bank is. We, at the county land bank, we were established in 2018, so we're one of the younger land banks in the state. There are 46. The state legislation that enabled land banks was passed in 2003. So there are plenty of counties that have been doing this a lot longer than us that are definitely there to provide support. Projects actually, some similar to this. Some big projects, some really great things happening in communities to kind of help revitalize. The kind of short and sweet of what a land bank does is recycle land to productive use. And land banks remove blight, they increase property values, they create an economic impact, a positive economic impact, and really revitalizing neighborhoods and communities. Do you want me to go into anything else right now, or do you want
Maybe, is there any questions that Rachel may be able to answer?
I have a question about your describe the housing that you're going to put in here.
Sure, and there is more in the presentation about that, but we are talking from the land bank's perspective, if we're involved, we're talking quality, single-family homes, not high density. We don't want to pack 50 homes into this tiny area. There are some restrictions that the school has talked about, and you'll see that. And as long as we are involved, we want to continue these conversations with the community, including, if we were to take possession, we would continue, and all the way through selecting a developer. We don't just turn the property over to the developer and say, okay, great, do whatever you want to do. Absolutely not. We continue those conversations with them. We assure that what the goal is, if that's what's met, and we keep everyone involved and in the loop in that conversation. That's really important to us as a land bank, because we want to be a good neighborhood partner, and we are all members of the larger community. The land bank is a 5-member board. As the county treasurer, I'm the chair by statute. We also have Tamara Bozwinka, Gary Buren, Julie Griffiths, and Pauline Jaquish. So we have a 5-member board that controls the land bank.
When you say you would turn it over to a developer, or have a developer interested, it's not gonna be like the development stick down by River Street where there's blocks.
Sorry, I'm a little squeaky. Okay, so when we talk about turning over to a developer, we would not simply turn it over to a developer. They would have to have a plan, including how it's feasible for them. So we couldn't get one house in and they're like, whoops, what happened? So we would, and if that, there would be some assurances built into our agreement with the developer that if that happened, you're not continuing. We're gonna look for somebody else.
Is that property then, you are the one selling the property, the land bank's name is on the deed, and therefore if you have a community input into it, you're the ultimate though, you can say yay or nay as the owner of the property, is that correct?
That is true. So if the land bank were to be involved, it would go from the school to the land bank. And yes, but again, community input is incredibly important to us. We do not want to come in and just do something to do it. We want something that fits with this community and that is really going to be a great use of property.
And I think the next couple of slides will talk about, we are the owner of the property as a district, the board, and we are able to apply deed restrictions before it's presented to the land bank. And then those deed restrictions would have to be followed through with them and the developer. And I would like to explain that in the next couple of slides. But
Would you repeat again, though, the land bank, what the criteria for that, and it didn't seem to fit this parcel of property, so would you repeat that again?
Well, I guess I'm not sure what you mean by criteria.
You were saying, like, you said it's blighted.
Oh, well, no, that's kind of a generic goal of land banks, like across the state. We talk a lot about removing blight in communities. That's not necessarily saying that this property is blighted or that that's a criteria that has to fit for the land bank. Land banks are really great tools that can be used for a broad variety of things, and each project is going to look really different depending on what the property is, what the goal is, what's best for the community, but we just have some unique tools to kind of make those projects happen.
I see on your website that you currently have 4 properties as amenities as well. And you're new. Have you done a property that was developed into this kind of residential scheme at this point yet?
Nope. Nope, we are very young, we have not done big projects, but like I mentioned, we have a lot of support throughout the state from other land banks that have done this, but no, we have not.
So this would be your first attempt at this kind of a project?
Sure. And I mean, you're not gonna have an opportunity for this kind of scale in a community our size very often, so, but yes, this would be a first.
I've got, go ahead, and then you, and then the doctor.
One, is the single-family housing subsidized in any way? 2,
No.
the designation of a brownfield, does that entail some kind of polluting of the land and that it needs to be reclaimed? Or would you define brownfield?
So brownfield, if the land bank's not involved, brownfield does have to do with pollution and environmental contamination. When the legislature set up in 2003, the way the land banks operate, they wanted to give them some tools to actually be able to do things. And so they said, okay, when you have a land bank, any property owned by the land bank automatically qualifies for the benefits of a brownfield without those qualifications.
I forgot that the single-family housing is not subsidized.
Correct.
Okay.
Go ahead, sir.
So just a quick question, I don't mean to be a thorn in anyone's side, I just kind of want to clarify things here. When I voted for this bond, I saw that exact same picture right there. It looked like a nice public park, place for me to be here. I live over on 8th Street. I have 7 and 8-year-old kids that are going to grow up in this neighborhood. Now that we've got this bond passed, it's going to cost $400,000 to tear the building down. We've got $29 million to now build houses with on this property? Is that
No.
kind of what I'm hearing?
No.
Okay, 'cause it says we're building move-in ready homes.
That would be, if we were to go forward with a land bank, they would be shopping this project to a developer.
Okay.
And all the expenses for the development of the property would be the responsibility of the developer.
Okay.
The Land Bank Authority, County Land Bank Authority has tools that provide access to state and federal money for a developer to reduce their costs to make this a viable project.
So we're not putting homes on this property?
No, the development
Okay.
would be focused on homes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
They would be focused on.
Sorry, I'm just trying to clarify, just want to make sure.
That's a very good question.
Okay, thank
They
you.
would build homes, yeah.
The doc,
I have a couple of questions for you, Richard. One is that we understand that you took the initiative to contact the school. That's good, correct?
Yes.
And you have no experience with this type of project before, and this area is not contaminated. What made you why did you take the initiative?
So it doesn't have to be contaminated. I know when we throw around the word brownfield, people think that automatically means contamination or some type of, but with it being a land bank, if it were owned by the land bank, that just opens up the door to those opportunities for us. It has nothing to do with contamination.
What was it that, with this property that caught your attention?
So, like I said, we were established in 2018. We're a pretty young land bank. COVID kind of got thrown in the mix there. So as we're growing and talking about ways we can help in the community, especially now that we're kind of, maybe, I don't know, post-COVID, how can we help the community? What things can we do throughout the county? And so we were looking and we were asking people in the community, do you have ideas for projects? Where might we be able to help? And there's a meeting, it's called the Regional Summit, that's held with community leaders every fall. And it actually was an idea that was brought up at that because we had a presentation about ways that the land bank can be used and help in different areas. And so that the idea was brought up of the Jefferson School. And so we said, okay, hey, let's have a conversation. Let's see if maybe that's an area that we could do something positive.
Jefferson School and not the old Kennedy School on 31. I can see where everybody's looking great for that.
Yep. And that there are many, Yeah, there are many properties in the community that have been discussed. You know, a lot of things come into play with what projects will work and won't work, but there are a lot of opportunities, yes, absolutely.
Right here?
So, make it straight, you would acquire the property, but the district doesn't receive any funds from the county land bank in return for you acquiring the property.
That is true, but then we also take on all the costs of the demolition. Yes.
400. Right.
Is that money to take over the cost of the demolition?
I'm sorry, there was someone running down the back. Go ahead, ma'am.
It sounds like you're nixing the park and the green space area. Is that what the community, is that what the community wants? It sounds like you're nixing the park and the green space.
Well, so
Why are
all I
you doing
can
that?
speak to is if the land bank's involved, if that's the direction that goes in.
Who
This is
decides
how
that?
the
Who
land,
decides
that's up
that?
to the school.
The Board of Education.
Okay.
Yeah, but if the land bank is the decision, you know, single family housing is what we're looking at, using the tools that we have now.
So-
But that is totally up to the school board.
So is the Board of Education listening to the neighborhood?
There's,
Listening to the community?
yeah, there's 2 members here right now.
Do you have your mind made up already, or is there
No,
really?
no, I showed the park slide. That's an idea that's on the table, and this is on the table. The board hasn't been offered opportunity even to review this. We're still in development of options.
It sounds like to me like you're pushing this land bank.
I think,
That's
If
what
I
it
could
feels
just
like.
interject too, so I'm a member of the board, I think Justine Justine Slawinski's a member of the board, I'm also on the facility committee, and I also live like kitty corner. So I've been involved with the Jefferson committee from the get-go, from 2019, when we first started talking and we first met here.
But like this gentleman was saying back here, when everybody voted for the millage increase, it looked like it was going to be a park and a green space and maybe some soccer fields and really nice, addition to the neighborhood, rather than housing and, what happened to that plan?
We talked, I think Ron just kind of went through what happened with the plan.
the plan's still there, represented in the rendering that is here in the slide that we showed.
Yeah.
But
And
there
It
seems
feels
to be,
like you're pushing, to me,
what
it feels
the
like you're pushing
the
this land.
feedback we got is, what is the land bank? What's going on? So I wanted to be able to present to you that perspective. That's,
Who brought that to the table?
Who brought what to the table?
We just heard, what we heard was, who is the land bank, what's going on, what can they bring to the, who was
Miss
that?
Rachel just said that she approached us with
Okay,
this.
so someone outside of the community is the one that brought that to the table?
She's from the
Rachel's,
community.
yes.
Mr.
Anderson
Dolan,
County.
can I take this over for a little bit? I don't mean to.
Well, I'd like to get through the presentation.
Why don't we do no questions for a while, and you finish,
All right,
and then I'd like to say a few words.
thank you. All right, I don't know where we left off on this. Working collaboratively with County Land Bank and our Jefferson Neighborhood Committee. Yes, it was my idea to get the neighborhood together and get feedback and not work in isolation and not hear your voices and your concerns and your thoughts. I thought that was a good idea. All right. Okay. Yeah. All right. If the district were to partner with the land bank, the district would determine deed restrictions for the property to protect the intended use. The county land bank would be responsible for the demolition of the Jefferson Elementary building and pre-development costs. That would be presenting this property to the potential developers to have an understanding what options would be here. I don't do that. That would be land bank. If we move forward, collaboration would continue with the Jefferson Neighborhood Committee and community stakeholders to envision the future of the property that supports the character of the neighborhood. That is extremely important to the Board of Education. County Land Bank would seek funding from potential development incentives and see the project through to development. All proceeds for the sale of land would go to the county land bank to cover the cost of demolition, redevelopment work. Deed restrictions, exploration. Interest of maintaining the character existing single-family home environment. So we developed this through a committee made up of members of this group. We got together and we talked about if this is a possibility, what restrictions on the property do we feel that are important for the neighborhood? So we landed this family home environment with similar density of lot sizes. The subcommittee discussed the following of the Jefferson property as proposed lot sizes and building restrictions. So we landed on these three items. At 10,000 square foot for a lot size, 80 foot lot width, that would be curb, 80 foot at curb, and 1,200 square foot single family home size. The next slide will put this in perspective. Currently, neighborhood zoning comparisons. This property is kind of in between R1 and R2. It's actually R2. So you look at R1, and those three numbers are represented there. 15,000 square feet lot size, 100 foot wide curb space, 1,500 square single family home size. This property lies in R2. That requirement is 6,000 square feet lot size, 60 foot of curb space, and 960 square feet single family home size. That's what this property sits in. And our committee that worked together, just to go back a slide, this is where we landed. So the restrictions that might be considered if we think we're moving forward, or a recommendation to the board to consider, would exceed what's currently required by zoning. It depends how they could be utilized. Because if it's just by current curb availability now, it would be less. So
What would it be if it's less?
15 or so. I don't know for sure. Yeah.
What's the ballpark?
Yeah.
Would there be a restriction for the type of home that could be placed? In other words, would it be a mandatory stick-built home, or would you consider manufactured housing?
Yeah, let me jump forward. I think I got a slide. Addition to the lot size and home and size restrictions, the committee also explored the idea of definition of standards of construction, basement meets crawl space, manufactured against modular, potential rental parameters. I'm concerned, board's concerned, short-term rentals. Is that an ordinance issue? Is it a deed restriction possibility? I would like to explore that.
Ron, I got a question for you.
Yeah.
When you're talking minimum and using the in-between R1 and R2,
Yeah.
is that a minimum 1,250 foot? So if
Thanks.
the developer came in and said, I don't want to do that, I want to, you know.
Grant, 1,500?
Yes.
Yes, that's a minimum.
Okay.
Yep, thank you, John. Potential rental parameters, interim maintenance of the property, that'll have to be why it's being developed or considered. We have to make a determination on the responsibility of the maintenance of the property, how it could potentially be used by the community in the interim. Though that's a conversation that we would have. What might occur if the property doesn't sell? We'll have to have those conversations. I am uncertain at this time. I think it's too early to speculate because a recommendation hasn't even come forward for the board to consider. These are some questions and wonderings and things that we want to move forward potentially if the conversation continues. Board might occur if the property doesn't sell. Got Board of Education retaining the control of the deed restrictions. Those restrictions would have to be guaranteed, and I'm being told by our attorney for our district that yes, that those deeds would have those restrictions would have to move forward.
Right, somewhat unrelated to this discussion, but isn't it interesting that, so happy the city is here, that the lot sizes of the surrounding neighborhoods, so you're telling us in R2 zoning, 960 square feet, small lot sizes. I find it really interesting that the entire neighborhood that circles Jefferson School really don't fit those dimensions at all. So what you maybe should be saying, or the school should, not school, excuse me, the city should be thinking is, possibly we have the wrong zoning designation for the location of where they're at in that R2 zoning. Because the homes don't fit, the current homes don't fit those criteria, so it's almost like trying to shove 5 pounds of whatever into a 3-pound sack. And that's what it kind of feels like. And it just feels like to me that the wrong zoning is what we have here. And again, I'm so happy the city's here to hear that.
When we looked into what the property was zoned at, and then we looked at R2, we were kind of surprised. And so that was very motivating to make sure that the deed restrictions that was presented and developed by committee would move forward.
And I like the deed restrictions. I'm just saying, from a different perspective, the zoning is off.
Yep, I got
Clearly,
you.
the zoning is inaccurate for the location.
And I think we're due for a master plan update, so that's something we can look at.
You don't need a master plan update to look at that specific zoning thing.
I just think that you're right on that, because many things are just old houses on lots that before it was plotted. And so when they did plot it, we were given like 2 lots. I think we had on campus edition 5 and 6, just to, so what you're saying, it might have been, the zoning might have been that small lot size, but most of them are built on at least 2 lots. But ended up there. The other thing, Bill answers better than I am, is this, the ground, we're now putting in, I guess opposing would be the word, is it 40%, you can't cover more than 40% of your property, so the footprint of actual your driveway, and that, when we got into that lately in residential, that we cannot cover more than 40%, so we're.
Sometimes that's a drainage issue.
Yeah,
Is
that
it
might be.
40%?
It might be.
Okay, so the lot has to be pretty big, if you can only cover 40% of the structure, and that includes the driveway, right? Yeah, but for patio, state regulation.
No, that's the one.
It's being enforced.
Sir?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. So most of these residents realize that I grew up in this neighborhood, and I'm just wondering how many of the property owners from the show of hands could say that they bought their property thinking that this school would eventually be taken down and a subdivision would come in. You buy a property based on the location. As we all know, I don't sell real estate, but location's the one thing you can't change. And you buy a property because of the location and the convenience next to the school. You don't think when the school closes that they're going to come in and put a subdivision in. And when you're saying these properties, I'm wondering, because I've recently had some water concerns with the city, does the city even have the capability to connect these to the water system that's already here without putting more problems on that system? I'd like the city and Jeff McCooley to do a study on that to be able to guarantee the residents of that. My other thought is, if so many residents were under the concern that this was going to be green space, and that's the way you sold your bond, working in education, my understanding is that if you want to change that bond, you would have to go back to the voters. So is that something the district's planning to do at this time? We didn't care that we looked at the eyesore that Kennedy School has become. We didn't care that we looked at the eyesore of the old high school. We left those windows open. I was one of the last classes to go through that. We didn't even close the windows on the way out. So I'm just wondering why we're so worried now about putting housing development in here. And I would be worried about my property values. Can you assure me that they're not going to go down?
No, I can't.
So I'm asking, is the board willing to go back to the community and ask for permission to change the bond?
I think the bond language that was on the ballot represented multiple opportunities for the.
So will that be produced for people to consult with their attorneys on?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I'd like a copy.
We'll post it to our website for your availability to find.
So it's not already posted?
It probably is, but I can't say for
There
certain.
seems to be a lot of confusion on the questions we can answer. I mean, I'm not trying to be rude, but from your slideshow, you say, I think there's a slide on this, I think there's a slide on that. You don't know where these things are. It just seems like we'd have a little bit more information before we had a public meeting.
I can't anticipate all questions, but I respect your perspective on that.
Thank you.
Yes. Yeah.
I have two questions. One, I read in the paper, and I would like to know the conversation that went on behind closed doors. There was a meeting behind closed doors, it's in the newspaper. I'd like to know what was discussed behind closed doors. Second question is, do you have any personal connection, relationship to a proposed developer of this land?
No, I don't, and I'm not sure what closed session or closed meeting.
It's said in the paper.
Yeah, my intent. Okay. My intent, like I said, I started this committee and this communication for the purpose of transparency. That's always been my goal. We've been meeting since 2019, and so the input and the involvement is something that I've been facilitating since the very beginning. So if you more specifically about that meeting, I would like to know. Sure. Okay. Yes.
So I was on the Jefferson committee subcommittee, and I'm curious to hear what Dr. Gunderson has to say, because I would say the majority of that committee were not in favor of housing. Dr. Gunderson.
Can I get to the slides? Dr. Gunderson said I would give him the mic after that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Excuse me?
Yes, sir.
It seems like this discussion has been moved from, we haven't talked about the alternative to housing versus local use in terms of how this property can be used for the families that are currently living here or that will be moving into the existing areas. This assumes that actually that Manistee has a need for more housing in this particular area. I happen to live close by here, and I've lived here since '75, and I've enjoyed living in Manistee. I've watched the housing that is going up down by the marina, and truth that it's the last type of housing I'd like to see happen on this property.
I think the Board of Education feels the same way.
I would rather see this property used for the families that live here right now. And so it seems like that discussion has been jumped over, and you're just talking about developing this for residents.
We've been meeting for a couple of years, and we have talked extensively about that option, and that's still on the table. But it's time for us to explore this in a timely manner for communication purposes, but it hasn't been removed as an option. So that what you're suggesting, we've worked on it and had communications in that process for what you just said. This meeting is exploring another potential, but we've had those meetings and we will continue to do so.
So Dr. Gunderson was engaged in a survey a month or so ago, and have the results of that been discussed at this meeting?
No, after the slideshow, Dr. Gunderson requested the microphone. So when I get done with the slideshow, I'll present the microphone for Mr. Gunderson to speak.
Dr. Gunderson.
Dr. Gunderson, I apologize. Mr. now. Probably. All right.
I happen to be Ron Gardine.
Okay. Nice to meet you. All right. All right, thank you. The district, we're part of the county land bank, support collaborative plan development considering the interest of the neighborhood, which I've done since the beginning, community and municipality for equitable property development. I guarantee the demolition of the Jefferson building within the timeline of the bond project. That's a requirement. Following the fine deed restrictions to protect the intended use of the property. I showed an example of that and some bullet points that we will continue to explore. Require developers to have a feasible plan and a timeline where the dollars would return to the county land bank. I'm not sure how that process works. We'll continue to explore. May not have all the answers that you're seeking, but I found this as a communication opportunity to get you here. So we'll continue.
One question. She brought up about going back for the bond.
Yeah,
In the current bond millage, you put 400,000 aside to take out this building.
yes.
Is that enough?
We haven't put it out for bid yet. So when we bid the 1927 building, we had 7 bids, and that came in under, or at or under our number. So that's giving us confidence moving forward. Hopefully this market, obviously we're not moving until 2025 on that decision. So what this market does in the meantime, I hope it calms down.
So according to the bond, is there only 400,000 that's allocated to take these down, and then the rest of that is?
For the total bond?
Yes.
So we're making one elementary out of the current Kennedy Elementary School. That has a budget around 17 million. And there's an additional gym for the middle school, high school. There's some,
comes out of the bond.
yes, and there's a roof replacement, portion of the roof replacement at the middle school, high school, and some improvements for the Madison Elementary in Tyler Township.
I have an off-the-wall quick question. When you're putting out a bid for demolition, does any of that, or can you figure in recycling in any way?
Yes, that's part of our ask or consideration for that. And for the 27 building, they're looking at reusing that for fill potentially.
All that terrazzo?
No, the terrazzo, we're trying to get to stay. It's a beautiful flooring.
Yeah.
And we're trying to reuse that for cost effectiveness, but it's also a durable, beautiful floor.
I just thought over here, as long as we're talking about demo and everything else.
Yeah.
In my mind, I hope no one foregoes the opportunity to do demo on this, because we'll be in the same situation as we are in the old high school. We're simply kicking it down the road, costs are going up, it's time to get it down, it's served its usefulness, remove it.
Yeah, in the...
That's why that was stuck over there, because the bond for the new high school was reduced to cut that one.
Yeah, and this bond was passed without having to reduce that scope, so this is a requirement. Yep, yep. Follow the finding restriction required developers, I've covered that. What happens next? The district will process the feedback received from the Jefferson neighbors, and the Board of Education will review the feedback and options moving forward. And again, today was to let you know about the land bank coming forward, representing this as an option. And I thought it was important that we had a forum so you could see the presentation and hear what this option contains. Okay? And so I again, leaning into transparency, looking for productive feedback, and so that I can communicate to the Board of Education related to what options are on the table. So we had a couple of hands. You'll be next. Sure. Go ahead.
Does the building, you did agree with it, but does the building have to be demolished? I'm just curious. Can it be repurposed at all? I've got the,
I did have a crazy moment because when we did the whole facility planning back in, I think that started in 2015. There was a building assessment that was done by Howard Kingster, I believe, and the cost of refurbishing this building to utilize it as a school, or I guess it could.
The heat is in the floor.
Yeah,
the pipes, they're broken, the leaves, and
the asbestos.
So all of the refurbishing or reuse of the building, the cost of it outweighs the ability to do that.
That's why, yeah, that's.
And the preschool or daycare and preschool business, which Manistee desperately needs, who are looking to possibly come to our area, and it would have been a lovely, lovely building to be able to do that, provide that for the community.
It's in our mind like you wouldn't believe. It is a terrible need for the community, and Miss Rabbit's behind you is just sweating with excitement because that is our future plans for the community, and it's needed so badly. And once we are able to exit Madison School for its use, we are looking at having a community center there. And we've been working on feasibility plans for that, but I just probably let more cat out of the bag than I should. But I'm so excited to hear that comment, because we're leaning into that. Yeah. Go ahead.
So again, I'm really not trying to be a stickler in anybody's
No,
side or anything,
please.
but I voted for this over here. I voted for this plan. Then I asked you if you guys were going to start building houses, and the next 4 slides were the style of houses you guys were going to build. Okay, if you guys turn it over to the county land bank,
Yeah.
what happens to the money that was allocated for that project? Are we getting that back as property owners here in town?
We are able to reallocate that for 18% shortfall because of inflation
Okay,
and other portions of the project.
I understand that.
Yeah.
I understand there were other portions of the project too, but going on, again, on the gentleman's spoke over here. I don't see how you can build houses here by passing that bond. That bond there was to have a space for kids, have a safe place for kids to come hang out and play during the day. As they grow up and go through school here, you put houses here and that's just another neighborhood. Like, cool, so now they have to go all the way down to Kennedy or just go run around on golf course. I thought that's what we were talking about here. And then the next 5 slides, we're gonna turn it over to the county land bank, and we're gonna, this is what could happen, sure, it's what could happen. I feel like I've been politic. I feel like you put this out here, hey, that's a great idea, we're gonna do this. And let's build some homes.
On all of our materials since we've been talking, housing has been a possibility here. Until the land bank presented an opportunity, the feasibility of that was really weak.
Now, is the land bank gonna buy this property?
They're going to raise the building potentially and take it down, and that would be their purchase of the property.
So they're gonna spend $400,000.
They're gonna spend $400,000 to take this property down, and they're just gonna pocket the rest of it? That's, from what I was sold on this one here, from everyone that I spoke to about this, that presented this bond throughout every time before this vote came out, it was gonna be a park, it was gonna be a great place for kids to grow up. There was
And
a
our
very
conversations
small-
in this
very
gym
small
rep-
window of, yes, there could be housing, but now it seems like that's what this is the main focus.
Nothing's been taken off the table. And the opportunity, I hope you appreciate the opportunity that for listening and feedback. And that's the goal of this, so.
I just don't want to be political, but that's the only thing that I'm worried about is like, it seems like it's been a bait and switch, because this meeting just became about what's in the development house.
There was no knowledge of that opportunity in our initial
So then
discussions about
I
this.
think a new bond should be discussed, rather than saying, well, we'll just use this bond to allocate houses.
We'll do what's legally required.
All right, Mr. Brown, President. Go for it.
So just out of curiosity, if we're being transparent,
Yes.
the fact that we're over budget, as most districts or anybody who's building right now knows, because of cost of materials, is that why we're looking at developing this property?
I put it up
Quite
as.
frankly, I think if this goes wrong, you might never get another bond.
Okay, I understand. I did put up the bullet related to that the overcosts are an issue, and it is a factor.
So if we take any options off the table within the district, like maybe we're gonna use used furniture for a portion of the time rather than get new furniture.
I wish, yeah, all of that's on the table. When you're talking about 20% of 30 million, it's more than 400,000. So we've got to make up ground in lots of areas.
Well, 400,000, so are we open to if the community could raise 400,000 to demolish this building and donate the land? Because somebody's gonna profit. If they spend 400,000, these houses are gonna go for a lot more than that.
Did you just make an offer?
No, I didn't. I asked if the community would want to purchase it.
I can't answer that question.
So would he ask if you'd be open to that?
That would be the Board of Education.
Is the board here today?
She introduced herself.
Just one person?
No, and Justine.
I'm over here now.
Justine's over here now too.
Yeah, if I may, as Ron saying, no, there's not a decision that has been made. The intention of this meeting, as well as many meetings that the community has been invited to, is to discuss some of these options. I think, as the gentleman was indicating, perhaps that is an alternative funding source that is worth exploring, but we need to come together to explore those options and see what else could be on the table. And I believe that's what the neighborhood committee, for those who have volunteered and chosen to be a part of that, have been in some of those conversations, and there's opportunity for others to communicate as well.
Dr. Jefferson.
Hi, I'm Paul Gunderson. I live across from Jefferson Elementary and have for almost 36 years. And I've really enjoyed it. I particularly enjoy it when kids come up to the fence and go, Dr. Gunderson, my rash went away. And that is really happy. It's adorable. I'm wearing two hats tonight. One as a member of the neighborhood committee, and another as just a neighbor with my own views and preferences and so forth. I think Mr. Stoneman accurately portrayed what we did as a neighborhood committee. I think it was pretty accurate. Initially, when we first met, we talked a fair amount about green space / recreation space, which I, from here on, will call green space. I'd say at the very first meeting, there was a member of the committee, who was a councilman for a different neighborhood, Dave is our councilman, who brought up, he expressed his opinion that Manistee already had too much green space, it's too hard to maintain. And he also felt that this property should be used for affordable housing. That's how we first got talking about housing, was at the very first meeting, and so forth. As Mr. Stoneman said, Vidar learned primarily a little bit me, but he's an architect. We did develop a proposal for a green space, recreation space. I said I wasn't going to do that, but I did it. You can view those features. I don't think that's real important right now. But after he talked about affordable housing, we learned a lot. We learned about zoning, we talked about square footage, we talked about lot sizes and street frontage, and modular versus different types of homes. And I think that pretty much has dominated much of the discussion since then. I don't know if it's because we sort of exhausted the discussion about green space, but that's in effect what's happened. That's been the emphasis. And so, as Mr. Stoneman said, although there has been no formal abandonment of the green space options, and the people from MAPS and the school board will tell you that nothing has been decided, and that is accurate. It seems that the topic of green space has gained less attention, and I find that a little bit non-reassuring. I've talked to a lot of people here, and so I can maybe save some time for Mr. Stoneman. I also find it a little bit non-reassuring that a subcommittee was formed to talk to the land bank. But even though the topics have been brought up, we have formed no subcommittees to talk to people from the MRA or the 350 Club or the Manistee County Foundation. So it seems like the emphasis has been, as you are reading, and have been shifting more toward residential. So what about green space? Whatever happened to green space? I think, more importantly, what do the neighbors feel and think afterward? So what were their expectations? What did they think they voted for? So how do you find this out? I talked about, as Dr. Garneen said, a survey. Mr. Stoneman did not favor a survey, but he favored having this forum, which is fine. But that doesn't mean you can't talk to people, and so we did talk to a lot of people, not everybody. Some people are quite plugged into local politics and schools. So we didn't talk to everybody. I'm not a pollster, but we reached a lot of people and found out some interesting things. So first of all, many of the neighbors have lived here a really long time. There's one home that was built by the family that still maintains it. It was built in 1885 and has been used by them continuously. So I think it's important to know what they think. Some people have moved here and settled here in the neighborhood recently, and they have a huge financial investment in the community, and they pay a lot of taxes. I think it's equally as important to know what they think. I found that they tend to be pretty strong MAPS supporters, the people of the neighborhood. They support the faculty, they're strong supporters of academics, they support athletics, music. So other things is that they, when you talk to them, and I think this is coming out a little bit in this meeting as it goes on, they really thought they were going to get green space. I know it was mentioned in some of the materials. I don't think that was the emphasis. They based it on several things. That is from the website. I think it was talked about more at the initial forum a couple of years ago. And articles in the newspaper. And I'll quote a couple. The district hopes to use funding for repairs, renovation, and demolition. The plan is to demolish Jefferson Elementary and create a green space and an athletic field. Another article in the Manistee News Advocate said, if approved, the bond would allow MAPS to tear down Jefferson Elementary and turn that area into a community green space. This is probably what you were thinking about. And a recreation hub to meet the needs of recreational groups throughout the community. And what the article doesn't say, as you have noticed, is that it would be demolished and given to the land bank, and then housing would be developed here. It didn't say that. I probably wouldn't have voted for that. And I'm not sure about the rest of you.
Mr. Jefferson, if I may, just the fact that we didn't know
Exactly.
about that opportunity.
I
So
understand.
when you say that was absent, you're right.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't a known option.
Then it shouldn't be included in this bond.
Anyway, he makes a good point. You know, the land bank would have been there, but even if it had said Jefferson would be turned down and used for residential, I'm not sure I would have voted for that. It's a good point. We also learned that the neighbors here have actually treasured living across from Jefferson Elementary as a neighbor. They love it not because it's a beautiful and well-maintained building and property. In fact, they're going to tear it down. There are also 5 outbuildings, some modular, some little barny things that were supposed to be temporary. And some of them have been there for 30 years. So it's not a beautiful building that they enjoy. They love it because all the children of the community rotate through that school, and they love what they see there. They like to see soccer. They like to see pickup ball games. They like to see people enjoying the playground equipment. They like walkers. Somebody even said they like the squeaky swings. My favorite, besides the rash thing, is to see and hear shrieking children explode from that building at recess. That's my absolute favorite. So anyway, I think what the voters thought they were getting was something different than residential. They thought they were voting for a proposal that would allow all citizens of the area to continue to enjoy this property in the future, and not just for a few lucky homeowners. We all understand that there are certain acceptable strategies for passing a bond issue. You got to educate your voters on what the district needs. It's very important. I think you have to pick a timing for the vote. Who's going to be in town? What else is on the ballot? I think those are all important things. You have to motivate your base, people with families, to get out and vote. I think the one strategy that is never acceptable is to promise one thing and then do another. So anyway, I hope I represented all the views that you talked to me about, or other people. If I have mischaracterized any, please feel free to speak up. Yes, sir.
I guess my question goes towards the city manager. You said that there's 180 acres of park space in the city of Manistee, and that developing this property was not a priority. Then why is that picture drawn up? Why are we sold on it?
So that is not a city project. It's not city-owned land, that is school land.
So we're just saying, like, all right, well, you guys aren't gonna maintain it, so we're just gonna stretch, like, my biggest issue with all of this right now is why is that picture up there and we're talking about everything but that?
We have spent time with that conversation. I solicited members of this committee to draw this and contribute to that idea. So yes, it has been vetted and it's not off the table.
You know, it's not off the table, but I don't even understand why housing is on it.
It is a need in the community. Oh, go ahead.
I am Karen Goodman, and I am your county commissioner for this district. And I just kind of want to put this together. I'm the vice chair. Jeff Donson's in the back. He's the chair of the county commission. Rachel came to just offer this. It is not a given. It is not an expectation. We're just sitting here. This is something new for the county. This is a way of kind of infusing some money into projects so that our community as a whole can grow. And, you know, I think of the Bear Lake building that was torn down by our land bank because it was such an eyesore. So we're here to do good things. We're offering that opportunity to you. If you choose not to have residential, you choose not to do that. Just know that we're standing back here. If you want our help, we certainly will do it. Rachel is marvelous. She has taken this opportunity to learn about the land banks and has run with it. So it has good possibilities, but it's only going to be what you want. We're not flexing our muscles. We're not coming into your district. We're not doing that stuff. We're here to help you.
I'm on the CHIPS Lead website right now, and I am looking at the site plan for the Kennedy building. So right now, there's a big green space next to the Kennedy building. When the Kennedy remodel happens, there will be no more green space at Kennedy. So the kids that play there have nowhere to play. The teams that practice there have nowhere to practice. I was on the Jefferson committee, and I have always felt strongly that it should be a green space, and I have always said to Mr. Stoneman, we don't have enough practice fields. He suggested Sands Park. Well, you can't play soccer or football on Sands Park. There was some remodeling done in the fields inside the track. I have walked that space. You still don't have enough space for teams to practice. And that's why I voted for the millage, because we need more green space. We need place for these kids to play, and that isn't in the plan if we give it up for housing. So I'm sorry the city doesn't want to manage any more parks. Well, you're not going to have to manage the one at Kennedy because it's going to be a parking lot.
That's not the city property. Yeah, and just, again, we have the park on the table as green space. We were approached by a group to explore housing. There's discussion in the community related to the exploring that. I'm having a committee meeting today to communicate to you what this option is, because I think there's miscommunication or wonderings happening, and I'm trying to provide transparency to a possibility. I'm not shoving anything down anyone's throat. I am just communicating what opportunity exists. I appreciate the feedback. I appreciate the feedback. I understand where you're coming from. It is valuable that you're here and sharing that, like I said from the very beginning of the meeting. So I'm just providing an opportunity to share. So it's not in stone. And that I did a bait and switch, I didn't. And I feel that was something I didn't do. Yes.
I was just gonna say, I'm on the City Parks Commission, and Karen, who also grew up in the neighborhood, who's our neighbor now, so we're both neighbors, but our real hat is probably in this is the Parks Commission. I find it unusual that the land bank was brought into this, and I know they approached you, not vice versa. But the Parks Commission, the City of Manistee Parks Commission, and probably the Recreation, were never approached. It wasn't like, get someone from the chairman or someone here. And I might not have followed this close enough, which was my fault, but I trusted the school. I saw the same thing, and I wasn't fully aware.
My head city council was on the Jefferson committee, and all the
But
feedback.
that's not the parks.
I understand that, but where the funding is coming from is kind of working on how it's maintained.
No, I agree with this.
Yeah.
Nick was on that for that reason. He represented the city council.
And he was on the subcommittee
Not the
to talk to the
land
land.
bank as
Not
well.
the neighborhood.
Yeah, Dr. Gunderson was on the subcommittee also. Yes,
But I was gonna say,
Right.
what we proposed at the Parks
Is there
Commission,
something-
and I know just an idea, was that what we proposed at the Parks Commission was possibility, and I don't know if it's possible or not, but another thing to research and explore was the trading. Like, what if we gave MAPS Sands Park to maintain and use, which is adjacent? MAPS would have an entire city block then, because we are losing the old Chippewa football field as green space, and then you would just have that. And if the school needed to make tennis courts so we could hold a sanctioned school meet, because it's required to have 8 rather than 4 tennis courts, they allow us to have them, but we'll never have the regionals or whatever because of our lack of tennis courts. So if the school owned that, maybe someday with a grant or whatever, we could get tennis courts. And what if the city acquired this? Then the maintenance issues would maintain the same. The big issue is who would mow it. MAPS would mow that, they would mow this.
Yeah,
So,
the sand park has been donated to the city and the school.
right.
So we contacted the Sands family about that option, and it's not an option because of how the park is set up. So we explored that
That would
opportunity.
have been a great solution.
But could we still even do that? I know that, because the big issue is mowing it and maintaining it. Could we still do that? Maybe you actually-
Technically, I'm saying the Sands family still controls the use of that property. The
So we
city,
could care if you're talking about maintenance, right? Maybe, and not, and I just want to say, just an idea, a proposal, because the Parks Commission is a little worried about losing green space, like, actually, we lost a little bit at the beach. When it's, if you go by there tonight, you will see that. The encroachment is, we're losing some in the beach, we're losing Old Chippewa Field. So I just want to, last thought was I saw this quote when I was doing this, and it was from the statement from the National Recreation and Park Association. Parks go beyond grass. They go beyond trees and recreation equipment that they compromise. They become integral parts of a community. They bind people together over their shared love of the outdoors and their desire to see beauty in their neighborhoods. And this is a neighborhood. We can't, it's a special neighborhood because whoever said it, it's an old neighborhood, and not just old people. There are young people here, but it's people who have been here and are raising their kids and are choosing, like this man back here, to come and raise their kids here. It's a neighborhood that people want to come back to.
and I didn't
mean
mean
that,
Hey, Ron?
Yes.
One more thing, you do this last over here for me. You
No.
want our feedback. Can I get you to back up your slides to that green space for me? Too far. Right. Okay. That's one, that's a good one right there, and then two more back where you're just at. All right, either way, what I'm trying to say is, my feedback as a property owner here in the area of Jefferson is I want the green space, I want the outdoor lab that you guys are talking about, I want the place for my children to grow up. That is what I give as my feedback for here. You guys can have the floor from here on out. Thank you very much.
What's your name, so
My name is Stan Baca. I live over on 8th Street. I've got the farm and insurance here in town. How you doing? Nice to meet you. Thank you.
Actually, double define all of the board of education.
What's that?
So as we move forward, we'll continue to reach out, invite you here and talk. And again, we'll give feedback to the Board of Education. We have 2 members that will be able to speak to it during our meetings. And we have an established committee. If you would be interested in at least receiving the emails and you are not, let me know. My email address is available. If we have a meeting, we send out minutes from the meeting. So make sure that you get a hold of me or my office and get that on that list. Mitch first.
Yeah, real quick, Brian. I'm concerned, I hear everyone talk about green space. That's what I believe was discussed also.
Yeah.
But I don't believe that currently the city is adequately maintaining their green space. So with that information, if the city's not wanting to provide that green space, is that something that the school would consider on an ongoing maintenance basis?
Because it was, the housing wasn't represented as an option until later, that has been a part of our discussion and planning to evaluate the affordability of what green space is.
I just encourage you to continue to explore that concept. I'm sure you are. So I just would hope you would continue to explore that, and we would have an opportunity to see what some of those long-term ongoing maintenance costs are associated with. It's one thing about buying it up front. That's the easy part. It's 20 years of maintenance down the road, which is the hard part. So I would just encourage you to continue to do that.
And when we talked about green space, and I'm engaged in that process early on, we have grant opportunities within our community too that may exist to help support that also. And so we examined those opportunities moving forward, and again, I'm not dismissing that as an option, but I want to make sure that you understand what other options are on the table for discussion. And I think it's important as a group that you understand what they are before they're dismissed. Yes, ma'am, you're next.
I think everyone appreciates that you're listening to the community. I mean, that's really important. So I have a proposal. Why not do a straw vote right now? How many people want green space stand up, or how many people want to see residential buildings go up? Well, we can have a little vote right now. How many people want green space?
I don't think it's a mystery. But I think the Board of Education should examine options because they're responsible for the whole community potentially too.
Well, and if you put soccer fields or baseball fields, it wouldn't be just for this area, it would be for outlying areas.
I agree. And those have been all of our conversations in prior meetings leading up to that. It was explored and brought forward in conversation because we understood the value of it.
But once you get rid of that green space, you're never going to have that.
I understand. Yep. Okay, I will have to cut this off, but hands in the air. Nope. He's going to go first, but you'll go next, and then we got one over here.
Just real quick, this would have always been Matt's property. By virtue of the building being torn down, doesn't mean the city owns it.
No.
So relative to the city maintaining this, they don't have any interest in that. This would be, they don't cut our football field, they wouldn't cut this.
Right.
So I don't know what the city's role in ixnaying a park idea would be, because it wouldn't be their park to maintain anyways.
I think Bill is representing the amount of parks in the community.
Fair enough, but
I asked him to be here because I think it's important that he hears the feedback related to that.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
I want to do, just so everybody was aware that it's still MAP's property.
Yep, it's not the city's role. So as the district takes us on, if they do in green space, we're going to have to, we've got a lot of green space ourselves, and our our job is educating students, but it's also providing safe space for students to have activities in too. So we have a lot to weight in that decision. Okay.
I'm in favor of green space, but also landscaping. Like, for instance, talking about the parking lot, the energy location, whatever, that can be softened by planting, landscaping around the parking lot. So that's something that maybe should be kept in mind too in your drawings, your architectural planning.
And what we can afford to do, besides cut the grass and
It has to be maintained.
Yes.
My husband and I, for many summers, used to maintain the front and every wall.
Well, I
And those
imagine,
trees out front were donated by Jerry Steinberg.
I imagine if we move forward, there would be volunteers working in the neighborhood for some. Yes?
It's quite clear that we voted to support quality education and voted to respond to proposal, voted for green space as it's presented on the website. I think that it would be very good to post the legal opinion on your website that says it's okay to even consider something other than green space as a response.
That's fair. Thank you for that suggestion.
Well, my question is a fairness question as well. 3 taxing districts were represented in the school, your city, and of course the county. This is a property that has been not part of property taxes for 57 or wherever the city, wherever the school district acquired it. And so if it moved to being taxable property, it's reasonable for us as voters to understand what impact that would have on our 3 taxing districts. Realistically, I would believe that the city and county and as well as the district could estimate what turning this property into taxable property would mean to them in their budgets here. And that's important for us to understand because it's a reasonable position for the city, the county, and the school to take that they have to consider budgets. Is that the best and highest use? Well, I think collectively we'll have to make that decision. But we should at least know what that impact is. And I hope that we can live that out.
Yeah, one of the deed restrictions that there would have to be 3 school-aged children for every house. There was, yeah, thank you for videoing this.
This actually ties on to that, and it's a question I wanted to ask Rachel. But my understanding as a brownfield, all of those taxes would be captured for a period of time to basically pay for that $400,000 of demo. So that's the mechanism that a brownfield uses to accomplish the funding of these things. Is that correct?
Yes.
So therefore, there wouldn't be any additional tax capture to the taxing jurisdictions for a period of time until those costs were recouped.
That would go to the developer.
Or, yes.
For the reduced cost for that, right, Barry?
Yeah.
And that's kind of the reason housing is kind of an interesting, ever since I got here as a city manager in September, I've been hearing how we don't have move-in ready housing, market rate housing, so that was kind of an attractive thing, but also the revenue, and that allows for a brownfield, as you mentioned, to take on that $400,000, that capture, then pays that debt off, and then there's other infrastructure that we put in. So you get additional revenue to the schools, additional revenue to the city to help maintain parks, and also we get some housing, which we hear that there's a need for in the community.
And not this problem, so take that out of your head, but working with the housing commissions and having an understanding of housing needs in our community. I have 50% of our teachers are eligible for retirement in the next 3 to 5 years. We're struggling finding housing for the few teachers that we replace every year, let alone a landslide of them. I'm not saying this property is a solution for that, but it is a factor for our community. And those people provide services also that would live in houses that are developed somewhere besides Jefferson. They provide services that we need as an entity, as a community. And without that housing, then we start getting absent of services, teachers, doctors, nurses, and so forth. And that's my concern of overall Northern Michigan's housing issue is somewhere we have to make some decisions for that. It doesn't have to be here, but that is a factor. And the Board of Education, and I think as leaders of our community, we have to take that into consideration. And I think that's a factor of this conversation also. Not saying that, that's what's happening here, but understand I feel responsible to at least examine that and present it to for consideration as a responsible thing to do. So, yeah.
Mr. Stillman.
Yes, sir.
Every community, Mark Kent, every community is having a housing issue. There is no low-income housing. Everything's becoming much more expensive. And this is, we're not unique to that.
No. I said Northern Michigan.
No, and I just want to say this.
It's the world.
It is, it's a national problem, actually. I just think that you want to make sure you can get the confidence back in the community if you do the right thing.
Sure.
And it takes care of it. And just do the right thing, tell the truth, and keep it that way with everybody. And I think you're going to do fine.
I'm trying.
I can sense that.
And I know that, I know this housing idea came out of nowhere because it kind of did.
Yeah, it just, with COVID and everything else, it didn't get communicated.
Yeah. But it just came to us kind of recently in this process too. But I'm glad you're here. That's why I felt that COVID and the ability to meet face to face has been so inhibited because of this circumstance. I'm glad you're here so we can have these conversations.
And so for this whole process to continue, how do we guarantee that we are in the loop? Is it that page? Because I didn't put anything but my name on that. So do I have to contact your office now to stay in touch with the neighborhood committee?
That's probably the best option, to let Nancy's here and she will take your, she's probably already got your name right now, Nancy Day.
And another question I got is how do we ensure that everybody in the neighborhood is getting like the mass mailers that went out? I grew up 2.5 blocks away and I invested in a home 2.5 blocks away, 5 down the street from my parents.
Yep.
I voted for green space. I voted for continued value in this neighborhood. I spent hours scouring online and I listened to all the recordings I could find about the meetings that took place before that. And I'm not an idiot. I walked away from all of that really confident that that plan is the plan that was seriously considered. And like it was like an afterthought, a bullet point that's in tiny text is how it felt, right? That maybe housing, something other than that might possibly be considered. So that I first kind of want to get out of the way. So I hope that this isn't an event that causes the neighborhood. I went through public schools. I believe in Manistee area public schools because I'm a fairly successful 30-something today, and I attribute a lot of that to how I grew up, where I grew up, and the education I received from some of the educators that are in this room, in fact. I hope that this isn't the impetus for a large portion of Manistee losing trust in Manistee area public schools. Someone mentioned it earlier. I hope that this isn't the impetus for any future bonds not getting passed because we don't believe what we hear. So the question that I want to ask is, how do we make sure that everyone who lives in this neighborhood is getting mailers? I live in 505 4th Street. I didn't get a mailer.
Yeah.
I went through maps, but when I went through maps, I lived at 537 4th Street. My parents got one. My neighbors only have homeschool children. They didn't get one. They've never, why aren't we all getting notified?
Well,
how do we get notified?
I think it was a very specific route that we've used in the past.
Right, but I live right next to a guy that got one, a gal that got one. Why didn't I get one?
I'm sorry, I just got asked, are you talking about the little postcard that came in the mail? Yeah, some people got them and some people didn't.
Right, why is what I'm asking. And it's like a little rhetorical, like how do we all
I
stay
could
informed?
answer.
Yeah. How do we all stay informed, right?
Yes, I could answer. That was a traditional mailing that we had sent through this whole process, and it is by the mail carrier system. So we can continue to expand that at a cost of the district. That's why we do press release. Yeah, we do.
So if I can just do, I'm sorry to interrupt. It just costs us money to send that out. So you're asking for different ways to stay informed. So other ways to stay informed, of course, Manistee News Advocate. I know not everybody gets an actual newspaper.
Maybe just a suggestion that might be an investment we look at is informing all neighbors and not just some.
Yeah, and so we can expand, like that mailer that was sent out, I think that's the first time a mailer's been sent out in.
Yeah, it's the second time we've mailed
Second time?
for the Jefferson use.
Yeah.
Yep.
So
this
that's
is
not
a dominate,
Yeah.
maybe touch every neighbor instead of.
Yes, you can. And I'm sorry, someone just asked if you can sign up for email, and Rod has an email list for Jefferson Neighborhood Committee, so if you could write that on the back, in the back, and we'll make sure that everybody's getting the same information that the rest.
That was the suggestion I had for her, for the best ways. So if there's a notice for a meeting, if there's a notice for a meeting or minutes from a meeting that occurred that you couldn't make, they'll be provided to that.
No? Yeah, I have a couple questions. So I think Alyssa mentioned a great point. I got the mailers when you guys wanted the bond, but I didn't get the mailer for this meeting.
I also got the bond.
So I think there's been some miscommunication or evidently we retracted some of those addresses. But I know you and the city manager both mentioned the housing shortage, which I think we all realize there's a housing shortage. And I understand that there's definitely a rental shortage for long-term rentals in the city of Manistee. I can guarantee that anybody who's watched the real estate market has seen that we've had a lot of Airbnbs pop up, and that's definitely changed the long-term rental thing, and something that might impact the city and the school. And I've reached out to the city, but of course they didn't entertain what I had to say, so maybe you will. A lot of those Airbnbs aren't registered as rentals, so they're not paying the 18 mils, so you're actually losing tax dollar money that might actually help you with some of your school costs. I mentioned that to the city because several of my neighbors have had a couple of property issues with fences and deciding to tell their tenants that they could walk their dogs in my backyard to go to the bathroom. And when I brought that up to the city's attention about monitoring the Airbnb status, they told me that they don't have the city workers to monitor that. It really could just be printing off a list once a month. You go on the site, I mean, I'm willing to do it, provide it to the city, and they can just go through and see if it's a rental or not, because you're giving away tax dollars, but those people are making profits. And I'm just wondering, again, is there a meeting about green space in particular? Because I'd like to put that on my calendar.
We will let you know. Please provide
In a
email.
mailer, or?
Please provide email to the paper back there, and you will make sure you're notified of the next meeting and what the topic is, and maybe some agenda items.
And just so everyone's aware too, there's a school board meeting. I know, Liz, you came to the last one, that was great. It's great having the community at the school board meetings. They're a little more structured, obviously, they're not like a forum like this is. But if anyone from the public ever wants to come to a school board meeting to talk about other issues related to the school that are important, that's awesome. It's great having all the public involved and vocal and hearing what they wanna see.
Justine, anything?
No, I would continue to echo Teresa's comments. The board, to be very clear, I cannot speak for the board, but as a board member, a decision has not been made. There will be students in this building for about another 2 years. We have lots of time to still talk. So if you have strong opinions and you're concerned about what you have heard, please approach Superintendent Stoneman. The board is available. We'll continue to have these. But it's helpful if everyone can come looking to dialogue about solutions and not strictly concerns about maybe one option, then we can move forward with some of those others. So just encourage you to continue communicating and to bring some of those solutions forward.
I'm going to end the meeting. Is that okay? Thank you.